The other day, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a very, very liberal guy here in New England, and we were discussing the election, of course, and what's coming up. And he brought up Charlottesville as a classic reason why Donald Trump cannot be reelected President of the United States. And when I brought up the fact that what he was saying about what happened in Charlottesville and how Trump reacted to it was actually untrue, he became incredulous, extremely angry, began spouting all kinds of cuss words. So I rounded up these clips and sent them over to him. He now is apologizing, and he had no idea how much he'd been misled by the media. And I suspect a lot of you are in the same boat, too. But it is also why the media will get Joe Biden elected very possibly in the next 30 days, because of their ability to mislead, to spin the stories that actually happened, and make you believe something that absolutely isn't true. These are the original clips, the original interviews, and some footage from Charlottesville that I'm suspecting you haven't seen. And this is what Donald Trump was talking about, and you make up your own mind. For the last several years, we've heard an endless litany of made-up stories, falsehoods, and accusations against Donald Trump about what he has said about race in America, and that he has never denounced once neo-Nazis, racisms, alt-wing groups, and so on and so forth. He's never done it. You've heard it. You've all heard it over and over and over again. Well, this is a recording that was taken during a speech at the Oval Office a week or so after Charlottesville, a couple of days later, after the famous exchange where he made the very fine people speech. All right, and we're going to play that for you in a second because that is also just utter rubbish. But here is Donald Trump, and this is what he had to say about racism and neo-Nazis and white supremacists and violence in America. And it's time people heard it. The unfortunate part was at the time that this speech was given, very few people in the mainstream media would carry it. Very, very few. That is a disgrace because it would have debunked and undermined the last 2 or 3 years of rubbish about this man's beliefs and thoughts on race and equality.
We will be discussing economic issues in greater detail later this afternoon. But based on the events that took place over the weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, I would like to provide the nation with an update on the ongoing federal response to the horrific attack and violence that was witnessed by everyone. I just met with FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the deadly car attack that killed one innocent American and wounded 20 others. To anyone who acted criminally in this weekend's racist violence, you will be held fully accountable. Justice will be delivered. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws. We all salute the same great flag. And we are all made by the same Almighty God. We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. We are a nation founded on the truth that all of us are created equal. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. We are equal under the law, and we are equal under our Constitution. Those who spread violence in the name of bigotry strike at the very core of America. 2 days ago, a young American woman, Heather Heyer, was tragically killed. Her death fills us with grief, and we send her family our thoughts, our prayers, and our love. We also mourn
Now we're going to take a look at the actual exchange that took place during the famous Very Fine People speech on both sides by Donald Trump. And you'll see how absolutely misleading the interpretation that was spun out of this by the media that's been propagated for the last 3 years. It's just absolute rubbish. It is absolutely untrue, and it's not what took place in the conversation, and everybody's been lied to, frankly. And let's keep in mind, let's be very blunt and throw it right on the table. The Democrat Party want these statues gone for one very big reason that nobody in the DNC wants to talk about. All of the statues in the South of Southern soldiers and Southern generals and all that stuff, they were all Democrats. The Democrat Party, after all, did found the KKK. They had no Republican members when it was founded. There was no conservatives belonging to this group. It was all bigots and racists. And the DNC and the Democrat Party embraced and kept racists, KKK members even, in the House of Representatives. That is the raw fact of the matter. And the Democrats hate that. They don't want to discuss it despite all of their nonsense. But that is the absolute truth. And the Democrat Party do not want these giant bronze statues scattered throughout 1/3 of America to remind everybody what a bunch of horrible racists and bigots they once were, and still are in many cases. They're just doing it a little more sophisticatedly.
Said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
no, define it for me. Come on, let's go. Define
Senator
it.
McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have, you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
All of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop? But they were there to protest, excuse me, you take a look the night before, they were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. Infrastructure question, go ahead.
Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up?
I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
Are you against the Confederacy?
Race relations in America, and do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten better or the same. Look, they've been frayed for a long time, and you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. We have companies coming back into our country. We have 2 car companies that just announced. We have Foxconn in Wisconsin just announced. We have many companies, I say, back into the country. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact on race relations. You know why? It's jobs. What people want now, they want jobs. They want great jobs with good pay. And when they have that, you watch how race relations will be. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me, and it's very important.
Mr. President, are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as you, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No.
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country. Does anybody have a final? Does anybody have? You have an infrastructure.
What makes you think you can get an infrastructure bill? You didn't get health care.
Well, you know, I'll tell you. We came very close with health care. Unfortunately, John McCain decided to vote against it at the last minute. You'll have to ask John McCain why he did that. But we came very close to health care. We will end up getting health care. But we'll get the infrastructure, and actually infrastructure is something that I think we'll have bipartisan support on. I actually think Democrats will go along with the infrastructure.
President, have you spoken to the family? Have you spoken to the family of the victim of the car attack?
No, I'll be reaching out. When will you be reaching out? I was I thought that the statement put out, the mother's statement, I thought was a beautiful statement. I always tell you, it was something that I really appreciated. I thought it was terrific, and really under the kind of stress that she's under and the heartache that she's under, I thought putting out that statement to me was really something I won't forget. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you plan to go to